1940, Nevada. Two archaeologists pull a bundle from the dark of Spirit Cave expecting a lost artifact, not America's oldest natural mummy, older even than Ötzi. For decades, its true age and ancestry spark a fierce debate, tribal outcry, and a scientific mystery. When DNA from a single bone finally speaks, it not only rewrites how the continent was peopled, it reveals a lost world and a 10,000-year connection few thought possible. How did one forgotten mummy force history to change its story? Sydney and Georgia Wheeler moved carefully through the gloom of Spirit Cave, their lantern light catching on bundles tucked into the dry earth. They were expecting animal bones or broken tools, maybe another fragment of the region's prehistoric story. Instead, they found something far rarer, the tightly wrapped form of a human preserved by the cave's cool, arid air. They unwrapped layers of tulle matting, each strand woven in an intricate diamond pattern, and uncovered the partial remains of a man, his head and right shoulder still cloaked in leathery skin and tufts of dark hair, untouched for thousands of years. The hair, straight and coarse, turned a reddish-brown almost instantly once exposed to the light, a silent reaction to the world outside after millennia in shadow. He had been laid on his side, knees drawn up, cradled in a blanket made from rabbit skins. The blanket itself was a marvel, sewn with care and skill, its seams nearly invisible. Around his feet the Wheelers found moccasins, split-toed, crafted from two different kinds of animal fur, their soles tough but flexible. The footwear spoke of a people who understood both the land and the demands of long travel. Nearby, more than 60 objects lay scattered, awls, bone tools, and fragments of basketry, each one catalogued and boxed for the journey to the Nevada State Museum in Carson City. As they examined the skeleton, the Wheelers noted a healed fracture on the skull, evidence of a serious injury survived long before death. The teeth told a harsher story. Severe abscesses had hollowed the jaw, leaving behind signs of pain that must have haunted the man's final years. Yet the overall care in his burial suggested respect, even reverence. Every artifact, every layer of matting, every fold of the rabbit skin blanket hinted at a culture with deep traditions and refined craft. The Wheelers recorded each detail in their field notes, measuring, sketching, and labeling. They estimated the remains to be around 1,500 to 2,000 years old, based on the style of textiles and tools. Without radiocarbon dating, there was no way to know just how far back in time this burial reached. The artifacts and the body, carefully packed and transported, would spend decades in museum storage, their secrets waiting for new science to unlock them. In the moment, though, what stood out was the tangible reality of a life lived in a world both familiar and utterly lost. A man wrapped in skillfully woven mats, protected by the work of hands that understood the land, and laid to rest with the quiet dignity of his people. 10,000 years ago, the land beyond Spirit Cave looked nothing like the sun-bleached valleys that stretch across Nevada today. Instead of barren dust and salt flats, a vast inland sea shimmered under the sky. Lake Lahontan, covering nearly 21,000 square kilometers, this pluvial lake was one of the largest bodies of fresh water in North America, rivaled only by the great glacial lakes of the far north. Its waters filled the basins, fed by rivers that still bear their ancient names, the Walker, the Carson, the Truckee, and the Humboldt. Along these riverbanks, lush wetlands spread for miles. Marsh grasses waved in the wind, and tule reeds grew thick, creating a living patchwork of green. Flocks of waterfowl darkened the horizon each spring and fall, their migrations marking the seasons. Fish thrived in the shallows, while herds of antelope and bands of bighorn sheep grazed the uplands. The people who called this place home relied on these resources, shaping their lives around the cycles of water and movement. Tule, the reed that lined the lake's edges, became the raw material for baskets, mats, and shelter. The skill woven into every artifact found in Spirit Cave speaks of a culture deeply tuned to the rhythms of this watery world. But the land was changing. As the last ice age faded, the climate grew warmer and drier. Lake Lahontan began to shrink, its shoreline retreating year by year. What had been a single, sprawling expanse of water slowly broke apart into isolated lakes and marshes. Pyramid Lake and Walker Lake are all that remain of this ancient system, their blue surfaces a faint echo of what once was. The valleys, once green and teeming with life, hardened into the arid basins that define the Great Basin today. This transformation reshaped everything. Where once there was abundance, now survival demanded adaptation. The people who lived near Spirit Cave watched as the wetlands receded and the reeds grew scarce, but the very process that forced them to change also preserved their story. As the air became drier and the soil more alkaline, the cave's cool darkness became a natural vault. The remains and artifacts left behind, woven mats, moccasins, fragments of daily life, were spared the decay that claimed so much of the ancient world. The land that once sustained a thriving community became the agent of its memory. The mummy, wrapped in tule and rabbit skins, survived not just through human care, but through the slow work of climate and time. In the silence of Spirit Cave, the past endured, waiting for the day when science would catch up to the secrets locked in bone and fiber. The landscape itself became the keeper of a story almost lost to history. For more than half a century, the Spirit Cave mummy remained a museum curiosity, cataloged and boxed away among the Nevada State Museum's collections. The Wheeler's field notes, careful as they were, could only offer guesses about the age of the remains. In the 1940s, archaeologists relied on comparisons, styles of weaving, shapes of tools, the look and feel of a burial. Without radiocarbon dating, there was no way to know if the man from Spirit Cave belonged to the distant past or to a more recent chapter of Nevada's story. So for 54 years, the mummy and his artifacts gathered dust, their secrets locked away by the limits of the science of their time. Everything changed in the mid-1990s when a new kind of technology arrived in the world of archaeology. Accelerator mass spectrometry, AMS, could measure the faintest traces of radioactive carbon left in ancient bone, hair, or textiles. Unlike earlier methods, AMS needed only a tiny sample, a sliver of matting, a wisp of hair, or a scrap of bone. The process began with careful cleaning to remove any modern contamination. Then the sample was combusted in a sealed chamber, turning it into carbon dioxide gas. That gas was then converted to graphite, a pure form of carbon, and loaded into the accelerator. Inside the AMS machine, ions were propelled at high speeds, and the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 was counted with incredible precision. Every step was designed to squeeze as much information as possible from the smallest possible trace. In 1996, R. Irvie Taylor at the University of California, Riverside brought the Spirit Cave materials into this new era. 17 samples, including pieces of tool matting and human hair, were submitted for AMS dating. The work was meticulous, each sample tracked from museum drawer to lab bench, each step documented to avoid error. Taylor's team followed the combustion to graphite protocol, ensuring that the results would stand up to scrutiny. The anticipation in the lab was quiet but intense. For decades, the true age of Spirit Caveman had been a matter of speculation. Now, for the first time, the evidence would speak for itself, free from guesswork and tradition. The outcome would not only rewrite the story of one burial, but challenge everything archaeologists thought they knew about the earliest people of North America. The 54-year delay between discovery and dating was not just a matter of lost time. It was a reminder of how quickly science can change the questions we are able to ask and the answers we are able to hear. The Spirit Cave mummy, once a local relic, was about to become a key to understanding the deep human past of the continent. The numbers from the Accelerator Mass Spectrometry Lab arrived with a jolt. Spirit Caveman was not just old, he was ancient beyond any previous North American find. The radiocarbon dates pointed to an age of roughly 9,400 years before present. When calibrated, that meant the man buried in tule mats and rabbit skins had lived more than 10,600 years ago. For comparison, Europe's most famous natural mummy, Ötzi the Iceman, had lain in the Alps for just over 5,000 years. Spirit Caveman was twice as old. His story reached back to a time when mammoths still wandered the continent's northern fringes. The news rippled outward from the Nevada State Museum and the University of California, Riverside, where R. Irvie Taylor S. team had completed the dating. In 1997, Kirner and colleagues published the findings in a peer-reviewed journal, and the archaeological world quickly took notice. Headlines in science magazines and major newspapers declared the Spirit Cave mummy the oldest natural mummy ever found in North America. The discovery was not just about setting a new record. It called into question everything researchers thought they knew about the first people to settle the continent. The old methods of comparing basket patterns, tool shapes, or burial styles suddenly seemed limited. Hard data now showed that people had been living, dying, and creating complex cultures in the Great Basin thousands of years earlier than anyone had dared to guess. In academic circles, the reaction was swift and at times contentious. Some scholars welcomed the new timeline, eager to re-examine old assumptions about migration and settlement. Others hesitated, wondering if one extraordinary date could upend decades of careful theorizing. Internationally, the Spirit Cave find was compared to the great discoveries of the last century. The mummy's age meant that North America's story was far older and more complex than the familiar narratives of Clovis Points and Ice Age hunters. The Spirit Cave man, wrapped in his tool mats, became a symbol for a past that was suddenly deeper and more mysterious than ever before. This revelation also raised uncomfortable questions. If people were living in Nevada 10,600 years ago, who were their descendants? What happened to their traditions, their languages, their stories? With the world's eyes on Spirit Cave, the question of cultural ownership took on new urgency. Tribes in the region, especially the Fallon Paiute Shoshone, saw the mummy not as a scientific specimen, but as an ancestor. The old bones, once forgotten in museum storage, had become the center of a struggle over identity, memory, and the right to decide how the past should be honored. The shock of the dating results did more than rewrite timelines. It set the stage for a debate that would last for decades, drawing in scientists, lawmakers, and indigenous communities, all seeking answers in the silence of the cave. In March 1997, the Fallon Paiute Shoshone tribe filed a formal petition under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Their claim was direct and unwavering. The man unearthed from Spirit Cave was their ancestor, and his remains belonged with his people. The Bureau of Land Management, responsible for federal land and its archaeological resources, reviewed the petition and denied it. Their argument rested on the shape of the skull. Craniometric measurements, they said, suggested that Spirit Caveman did not resemble modern Native American populations. That position aligned with the Paleo-American hypothesis, which claimed that the earliest peoples of the Americas might have belonged to a distinct, unrelated group. For the tribe, the Bureau of Land Management decision was more than bureaucratic. It felt like a rejection of their history and their right to define their own past. The case moved to federal court. Lawyers for the Fallon Paiute Shoshone argued that the government's reliance on skull measurements ignored the weight of oral tradition and the evidence of cultural continuity. Years of legal filings and expert testimony followed, as anthropologists debated the validity of using bone shapes to determine ancestry. In 2006, after nearly a decade of legal wrangling, the United States District Court issued a ruling. The judge found that the Bureau of Land Management had acted arbitrarily and capriciously by dismissing tribal evidence and relying solely on morphology. The court ordered the agency to reconsider the tribe's claim, but the case remained in limbo. Without definitive genetic proof, the government and the tribe remained at an impasse. The remains stayed in storage, the legal battle unresolved, and the question of ancestry hung in the air, a conflict shaped by uncertainty, waiting for science to offer a final answer. S.K. Willerslev arrived in Fallon carrying more than scientific ambition. He brought a promise. No DNA would be touched without the tribe's blessing, and if the results proved native ancestry, the remains would go home. Earning trust took time. He made 3 visits, held long conversations, and welcomed tribal members into the Copenhagen lab when the Petrus bone was sampled. Only after the Fallon Paiute Shoshone gave explicit consent in October 2015 did the work begin. The Petrus bone, dense and shielded deep within the skull, offered the best chance of preserving ancient genetic code. Willerslev's team extracted DNA with painstaking care, every step overseen and documented. The findings, published in Science on November 8, 2018, delivered clarity where years of legal argument and anatomical measurement had failed. Spirit Caveman's Y chromosome belonged to haplogroup Q, 1B1A1A1A1-M848, and his mitochondrial DNA was D1. Both lineages are unmistakably Native American, and both are still found among tribal descendants in the Americas today. The genetic evidence was irrefutable. The man wrapped in tool mats and rabbit skins was not a stranger, but a direct ancestor of the people who had fought for his return. The study went further, revealing a genetic connection that stretched from Nevada to Brazil. Spirit Caveman and the 10,400-year-old Lagoa Santa remains in Brazil shared such close ancestry that their ancestral population must have crossed more than 6,000 miles of unfamiliar continent in less than 200 years. David Meltzer called it breathtaking speed, a testament to the adaptability and skill of the first Americans. Yet the DNA also showed what was missing. An Australasian genetic signal found in some ancient South Americans did not appear in Spirit Caveman, hinting at lost migrations and mysteries still unsolved. On November 22, 2016, the remains were officially repatriated to the Fallon Paiute Shoshone. Science had answered the question, but for the tribe, it was a homecoming long foretold by their own tradition. The man from Spirit Cave was returned to his people, his story, and his land. Ancient DNA now does what centuries of debate could not. It links living communities to ancestors across 10,000 years of American history. As science rewrites the past, tribal voices reclaim their own story, and the boundaries of identity shift in real time. The question is no longer who belongs to this land, but whether we're ready to listen to those who always have. Thanks for watching.